Who we are and what we are. Are these two separate concepts, or are they one and the same? While we're on this topic, is how we perceive ourselves more important, or is it how we're seen by others? These were things I found myself thinking of as I watched the first season of Overlord. Hi everybody, Katallina here, and today I'm reviewing Overlord Season 1. If you've seen the first season of Overlord and are here to see what I thought of it, thanks for your support. Feel free to share how you felt about Season 1 in the comments below. If you're new to Overlord and are trying to decide whether to watch the first season, I hope I can help. Now, let's find out if this show is a 10th level spell or dead on arrival. In the beginning, there is Momonga, the leader of the guild Uhh. He's the last member of the guild who is online on the final day the servers will be running in an MMO called Yggdrasil. And he's waiting for the servers to shut for good, while saying his last goodbyes to the home he and his friends have built over several years. Except, he never gets booted from the game. Instead, the game world becomes a real world, and the guild NPCs that he and his friends designed while playing the game come to life. Now, they expect their leader, Momonga, to guide them in this new existence. While he's trying to come to grasp with the fact that former NPCs now have autonomy, while at the same time realizing he's become a lich. He renames himself Uhh in honor of his old friends, and we'll be referring to him as Ainz moving forward in the review to avoid any confusion. I think that creating a story that is, from our human perspective, told from the typical RPG bad guys angle is rather refreshing, especially when paired with the fact that as an individual, the main character is actually neutral. He has something cast onto him due to his lich nature that has detached him from his former humanity. But he's not outright evil either. As a viewer, this aspect kept me on my toes and made me think at several key points in the story. The world building in Overlord is superb. We have characters at Nazarick where Ainz and his allies live, and then we have a variety of nations, tribes, and species that they come into contact with throughout their adventures, each of these having their own objectives and individual goals, with even more people who have their own wants and individual needs and desires within that. A story like Overlord would miss its full potential if not for the presence of classically good and bad characters to place Ainz and his friends into interaction with. And the story does a good job at making you like the good guys, hate the bad guys, but never forget who is at the heart of everything going on. It's a tricky juggling act, but I feel Overlord pulls it off. Overlord has a large cast of character hailing from a variety of different backgrounds. We'd be here all day if I tried to cover everybody, so I'm going to focus on a few of my favorites. We'll start with Ainz, since he's our protagonist and the heart of the show. Ainz is an extremely well-written character who makes the story work because he has a lot of different aspects to his personality and how he views things. The first thing to consider is that Ainz actually has two personalities or inner voices. There is the Momonga personality, who Ainz was before he got trapped in this world. This is Ainz's human personality, and we hear it in a separate voice as a sense of reason and insight in Ainz's head. This voice is often our connection to the story as humans, when there are not other human characters present for the story to use for this purpose. Ainz's other personality is obviously Uhh himself, the Lich. This is his outward voice, and is most commonly used in Nazarick and toward his allies that hail from there. In the early episodes of Overlord, the focus on Ainz figuring out who he is and how he's going to live in this new reality with his new body and mental state. Establishing a clear distinction between who Ainz is and was sets the groundwork for everything else that happens. If the writers had left Ainz there, he would have still been a reasonably solid character, but this exploration of identity in Ainz goes much farther, as well as having inner and outer voice, which are completely separate. Ainz also has multiple identities depending on where he is at any given time. In Nazarick, he has the standard persona of the Lich King, who runs the place. This is Ainz's default personality, and the one that his main allies know him through. Early in the series, he rescues a human village and introduces himself to the people there as a magician who wears a mask. This is the persona he is known as by Henri, a young girl he saves early in the show. In his third persona, Ainz is viewed as an adventurer named Maman, who wields a sword. This is the persona he is known through by the Swords of Darkness and Inferior, the guy who can analyze potions. If all characters only knew Ainz as his default lich persona, and were constantly terrified of him at all times, that would make for boring storytelling. But because Ainz is concerned about the state of the world and the safety and prosperity of Nazarick within it, we actually get a certain amount of balance and stability that allow a good story to be told, even while letting Ainz be a ridiculously overpowered badass. And to me, no character would have a more dire reaction to this than Ainz's right-hand man, Demiurge. Ainz relies heavily on this guy for strategy, and we often see him using Demiurge's ideas while passing them off as though he had considered them himself. Not to steal credit from Demiurge, but rather to reinforce the idea that Ainz is on the same page as those around him. Despite the fact that up until the servers shut down, this was all a game to him, a game which has now become very real with actual lasting consequences. The last major character from Nazarick that I want to mention is my personal favorite character, the succubus Albedo. What I love about Albedo is how the story takes equal opportunities to utilize her as a means for humor and to actually give Ainz heartfelt moments. Sometimes the show does both of these in one scene. Before the game ends and Ainz's new reality begins, he actually reprogrammed Albedo to be in love with him, thinking that he's never going to see her again, and assuming, in that moment, that she's just a piece of programming. Of course, now that she has her own agency and choice, he feels awkward about this, since he will never know whether her feelings are actually true. And even if they were, what the heck is Bone Daddy gonna do with that anyway? In addition to major characters who live in Nazarick, the show does a great job of highlighting a variety of different characters out in the world. This ensures that Ainz and friends have a vibrant and changing landscape to explore all the different aspects of their own character against. Among these, my favorites are the previously mentioned Henri and Inferior. I like how their little romance, a background feature of the show, makes it clear that in this world, life is marching on, even as we are watching a lich and his companions do their thing. I also like the awkwardness of Ainz's interactions with the Swords of Darkness, when he's pretending to be Mammon for this reason. As a modern Western viewer and a woman, one thing that really stood out to me is the idea that Ainz doesn't seem to care who gets in his way. Man or woman, if you prove to be a roadblock, Ainz will not hesitate to take you out. It's so common to see this idea that a man should face a man and a woman should face a woman, or that women facing a man should succeed or be protected under the idea of misogyny. There is none of that horseshit present here. The best example of this happens with the crazy dagger-wielding sociopath Clementine in the second arc. She does things that are not in Ainz's best interest. She has an accomplice that's a guy. Ainz has a female companion with Nazarick with him. Instead of having her take on Clementine, while Ainz takes on the dude, the show has the balls to pair the combatants based on their fighting aptitudes rather than on gender. And the insufferable Clementine gets death worthy of how annoying she was. But that doesn't mean that every time Ainz is in combat against a woman that he sees her as a gnat waiting to get swatted. The last arc of the season sees Ainz squaring off with a woman for completely different reasons, and because of this, his attitude toward the situation and its potential outcome is totally different. I like how the writers didn't fall into the silly boys shouldn't fight girls nonsense, without them then giving in to the equally stupid when a man fights a woman, one sex is always superior and the other is a joke crap either. The next thing I want to praise Overlord for, or at least make my listeners aware of, is its use of humor. Humor can be a totally subjective thing. What you find funny and I find funny is likely very different. I'll tell you up front that there was a lot of irony, silly physical comedy, and several times where distinctions between the new world and the human world are used for comedic effect. If you do not like sexual attraction being used in a comedic way, there are parts of Overlord that are going to annoy you. One of these, that I found particularly funny, starts with Demiurge looking for Ainz. He walks into Ainz's bedroom, and there he finds Albedo, lying in Ainz's bed while holding an Ainz body pillow. The show has established that we should find Albedo's attraction to Ainz funny, and then ties that into having a body pillow, something some people would do in the real world. Seeing a succubus do this, though, when attraction should hypothetically be her food, is absurd. And having her be caught doing this by Demiurge, who is essentially her competition for Ain's loyalty and respect, is the icing on the cake. Another less erotically coded piece of humor that really stood out to me is a situation where two people from Nazarick are on a mission for Ainz and riding in a carriage. They end up getting into a discussion about voice actors who represented them in the game, despite the fact that these characters are now people, well, demons and the like, in this new world. It was a brief moment in time that gave me Deadpool or She-Hulk vibes, and I totally loved it. Next, let's talk about pacing and structure. One of the things I think about when I consider whether a season of anime has good plot structure and pacing, especially for a first season, is whether I could recommend the series to a new viewer. To recommend something to a new viewer, once it has multiple seasons, I expect season 1 to be able to stand on its own 2 feet. A new viewer may be willing to watch 13 episodes of something, but watching hundreds or thousands is a different kind of commitment. Overlord Season 1 passes this test with flying colors. The season is broken into 3 smaller arcs, and all of the key aspects of those arcs are settled and contained within the arc they are introduced in. There's some brief showing of what we might expect in Season 2, but it doesn't leave us with a drastic situation, such as a major character being on the brink of death, that would make me more hesitant to offer this as a viewing experience to a new viewer on its own merits. Another thing that I can tell you is that the overall narrative and pacing of Overlord is stellar. Episodes flow into each other organically, and I found myself completing the season in 2 sittings. Now, to be fair, I have more time on my hands for that kind of thing than the average viewer. But my point is that, with how the show is set up, moving from episode to episode is like a bag of Lay's potato chips. Bet you can't watch just one. To wrap this up, Overlord's first season does everything that a first season of a new anime should do. It has a unique and interesting premise, memorable characters, and a solid narrative structure throughout the season's 13-episode run. If you don't like hints of sexiness and comedy, or are not a fan of morally gray main characters, this might be a hard skip. But if the idea of becoming your MMO character, or seeing how a human might deal with being turned into a lich, without that ever being their intention, intrigues you, then Overlord Season 1 might be a terrific next watch. I'm giving Overlord Season 1 5 out of 5 flowers, and if anything I've said has piqued your interest, I'd strongly recommend that you check this show out.